At the age of 18, I evolved into an Omega. In order to avoid a family-arranged marriage, I voluntarily let the old man I picked up bite me. The old man was obedient and compliant. When I told him to go east, he would never go west. He would bite wherever I told him to, like a loyal dog. Until the day of my heat, I witnessed him pinching an alpha's throat with one hand and crushing the other's gland with his leather shoes. Only then did I realize that what I picked up was not a dog, but a legendary mafia boss. I ran away in a panic, but was blocked at the airport by a man in a suit. He held a cigarette between his lips, with a cold smile. Little thing, after teaching the dog to eat meat, do you want to starve it to death now? The heavy rain hitting my face was really painful. I wiped my face, and my hands were shaking violently. The old man's pheromone still lingers in my trachea. The smell of whiskey mixed with gunpowder makes me want to vomit. This old bastard can even lay a hand on his own son. As I cursed under my breath, I ran even faster. After all, it's not a good thing for an Omega who is almost in heat to be running on the street in the middle of the night. When passing by a corner, a hand suddenly reached out and tightly grabbed my ankle. Damn it! What the hell is this? I was so scared that I jumped up and lost my balance, falling into the muddy water. A strong smell of blood rushed into my nose. I turned my head and found that it was an alpha, and he was almost dead. There was a half-broken glass shard stuck in his right abdomen, and half of his face was still buried in the stagnant water. One piece of his gold-rimmed glasses was broken, but the intact eye was terrifyingly bright. He looked like a floating corpse. Or rather, a ghost. I should have turned around and run. In this kind of weather and in this kind of place, having an alpha in a high-end suit lying there, it's either a gangster dumping a body or a plutocrat silencing someone. But, let go. Damn it, let go. I kicked the alpha's wrist wildly, gnashing my teeth in hatred. If I get caught and taken back, I'll skin this bastard alive first. Unexpectedly, the bastard actually smiled, and his blood-stained teeth were blindingly white. Ah, it's the little wildcat. You're talking to your grandpa. I gave him another kick, right in the face. This kick made the man go completely still. Is he dead? I'm a bit panicked. I felt his breath. Fortunately, he's still alive. Just as I was about to run away, I suddenly caught a glimpse of the watch on his wrist from the corner of my eye. Although it was broken, I recognized the brand. It would be enough to keep my mother alive in the small clinic for several years. Damn it. He's a rich unlucky guy. I looked at him and then at the dark alley entrance. If I leave him here, he'll either choke to death in the rain or be bitten to death by something attracted by the pheromones. I gritted my teeth. I'll just be kind this once. Be a good Samaritan. So I struggled to put one of his arms over my shoulder. I was almost crushed by his weight. Hey, unlucky guy. I gasped, my voice trembling in the rain. You're lucky. You owe me a life. Remember to pay it back. However, unfortunately, the unlucky guy lost his memory. When I dragged him, his head seemed to hit the stairs. There was a loud thud. I didn't care at that time. Now looking at his blank stare, I feel a bit guilty. Hey, I kicked the sofa leg. Speak up if you're awake. He turned to look at me. His eyes behind the broken glasses were blank. Who are you? Oh my God. I'm your father. I replied crossly. He fell silent, frowning slightly, as if trying hard to think about the possibility of me being his father. I can't stand it at all. What's your name? Where's your home? How many people are there in your family? Do they all have money? He shook his head, still shaking his head. I was furious, suddenly catching sight of something. His face changed drastically. Where's that watch? The one on your wrist. It was too dark and chaotic last night, and I didn't have time to care at all. He looked down at his empty wrist, still looking blank. It's over. Is he really suffering from amnesia? Then didn't I save him for nothing? Good for nothing. I was so angry that I kicked over the empty beer can beside my feet. The aluminum can clattered and rolled to his feet. He looked down at it, then slowly looked up at me. That look in his eyes wasn't like that of a fool. It was more like he was evaluating something interesting. I felt a bit creeped out by his stare. What are you looking at? Haven't you ever seen a poor guy get angry? I roared back bravely on the outside but timidly on the inside, thinking about how to deal with this alpha. Throw him out? There might still be people outside looking for trouble with him. Keep him? I can barely even support myself. And now I have to support a useless amnesiac alpha? Damn it. I looked at his damnably handsome face, which was even handsome with the bloodstains on it, and my expression kept changing. Forget it. Keep him for now. If worse comes to worse, send him to be a male model later and make a fortune off him. I threw a bun at him. It was leftover from yesterday and a bit hard. The poor guy didn't pick and just hugged the bun and obediently started munching. Bite, bite, bite. He was gentle and quiet. Tut, pretending. I pushed his bare legs aside. Damn it, so heavy. His muscles are rock hard. After plopping down on the sofa, I turned on my phone. As soon as the screen lit up, messages popped up one by one. They were all from the people in that family. Lucas, where have you gone? Call back immediately. The people from the Lee family are waiting. Lucas, your younger brother is in poor health. The Lin family also needs a powerful alpha to consolidate its position. Be sensible. Lucas, you're just a bastard. Although Mr. Benjamin has a problem with his leg and suffers from mania, he has power and influence. He's more than good enough for you. I felt nauseous after reading these messages. A match? Are they treating me like a stud boar for breeding? That guy surnamed Lee is said to have a lame leg. A disabled alpha whose pheromones might even be unstable. Maybe he's even impotent. Are they asking me to marry into his family and live like a widow? I let out a sneer and threw my phone aside. The phone hit the shabby coffee table with a dull thud. The unlucky guy on the sofa lifted his eyelids, seemingly startled. He stopped biting the bun. He looked at me, his eyes still a bit vacant, but it seemed like there was something hidden in them. I ruffled my hair in annoyance. What are you looking at? Eat your food. Sure enough, he lowered his head and continued to nibble little by little. He's so damn obedient. I gave him a sidelong glance. Although he has lost his memory, at least he has all his limbs intact and his face is presentable. An alpha with amnesia, an omega being hunted by the family. What a perfect match. Suddenly, I thought of something. My heat is coming soon. At that time, my pheromones will leak out uncontrollably. Inhibitors are expensive, and I can't afford a long-term supply. Moreover, it's only a matter of time before I'm found. Unless, I turn my head to look at the unlucky guy beside me. Unless I'm no longer a clean omega. A marked omega is of much less value to those wealthy families who want to arrange marriages, especially when marked by an alpha of unknown origin, and possibly a wanted criminal. Looking at the curve of his Adam's apple as it rolled, a crazy idea popped into my head. Ask him to take a bite? Hey, unlucky guy. I cleared my throat, trying to make my voice sound calmer. He looked up, with a small piece of steamed bun crumb still sticking to the corner of his mouth. His eyes were as innocent as a newborn puppy's. Damn it, it's a bit hard to say what I want to say looking at this face. I kicked the leg of the tea table irritably. Come here. He hesitated for a moment but still obediently shuffled over. When his tall body approached, it carried a faint smell of blood and an indescribable sense of oppression. Does he still have such an aura even after losing his memory? I shrank back, and my fingers unconsciously picked at the sponge in the hole of the sofa. Well, look, you owe me your life now, right? He nodded, very seriously. Then shouldn't you do something to pay me back? He continued to nod, looking at me, waiting for me to go on. Damn it, it's like training a dog. I gritted my teeth, steeled myself, and suddenly tore off the blocking patch on the back of my neck. The cheap adhesive tape pulling on the skin hurt a bit. The light pink gland was exposed to the air. I stiffened my neck and presented the back of my neck to him. Bite here. The air was silent for a few seconds. He tilted his head slightly, as if not understanding. Playing dumb. I was a bit annoyed. Use your teeth, aim at this piece of skin, and bite down hard. Do you understand? I gestured, my tone sounding fierce. He followed the direction of my finger, and his gaze landed on the gland on the back of my neck. That look in his eyes suddenly became somewhat focused, no longer the previous blankness. It was like a sleeping beast that had smelled something of interest. My heart skipped a beat. Damn it, I forgot he was an alpha. Even if he lost his memory, his instincts remained. Just one bite. A shallow one. Understand? Don't bite me hard, I emphasized, as if trying to convince him and also myself. He was silent. His gaze landed on my trembling fingertips, and suddenly he leaned in. The strong smell of brandy instantly enveloped me. His hot breath sprayed on the sensitive skin of my neck. I stiffened all over, and goosebumps instantly rose on my skin. Then, I felt someone gently lick my gland. It was like an electric current running through my spine. I suddenly shrank my neck, and the tips of my ears were red as if bleeding. Damn it. I told you to bite, not to lick. As soon as I finished speaking, the other person seemed to understand and wrapped his arms around my shoulders from behind. His canine teeth pierced the epidermis of my gland without hesitation. The strong brandy pheromone, mixed with the smell of blood in his mouth, rushed into my gland forcefully. It was like injecting high-concentration alcohol directly into the blood vessels. My legs went weak, and I almost collapsed to the ground. Fortunately, he quickly put his hand around my waist. It's so hot. Get away. Don't touch me. I angrily pushed him away and shrank to the other end of the sofa. My nape was burning with pain. Are you a dog? Biting so hard. I've told you to be gentle. I covered my neck, ashamed and angry, glaring at him fiercely. The unlucky guy sat there and wiped the corner of his mouth with his hand. There was a bit of my blood on it. He looked at the red stain on his fingertip with an unfathomable look in his eyes. Then, he actually stuck out his tongue and licked off that bit of blood. My mind went blank with a buzz. Humiliation and nausea instantly overwhelmed my reason. Immediately, I slapped him hard across the face. Pa! It was clear and resounding. He was hit and turned his head to the side. A red mark quickly appeared on his cheek, and the broken lens almost fell off. My palm went numb, and I was so angry that I trembled all over. Beast! Who told you to lick it? It's so dirty. I pointed at the mottled wall near the door and commanded angrily. Go! Get over there. Face the wall. Kneel down. I thought he would resist or at least be stunned for a moment. Unexpectedly, he just silently looked at me for 2 seconds. Then, he really stood up without a word, walked to the wall, and knelt down straight. His back was as straight as a javelin. Damn it, he really knelt down. I looked at his broad back, which still looked full of strength even in a cheap t-shirt. Suddenly, I felt a bit strange. He was too obedient. He was so obedient that he didn't seem like an alpha. He was more like a well-trained vicious dog. Facts have proven that he is indeed obedient enough. He kneels when I tell him to, and keeps quiet when I tell him to. When he's hungry, a bun can satisfy him. When he's injured, he licks his wounds silently and never cries out in pain. He's simply the perfect dog for staying at home. Traveling? No, for guarding the house. He's much easier to control than that lame Mr. Benjamin. I felt the gland on the back of my neck that was still faintly aching. The effect of the temporary mark is limited and won't last for a few days. But will the Lin family still want an Omega who has been bitten by an unknown alpha? Will the Lee family still want me? Even if they do, I'll give them a taste of disgust. So I brought him back to the Lin family. You still know to come back? Camila saw me and looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her gaze then fell on the man behind me, and she frowned. Who is this? Where did this beggar come from? Lucas, who on earth have you brought back? William also came out of the study with a gloomy face. Nonsense. How are you going to explain this to the Lee family? I smiled. Explain. I pushed aside the collar that was covering the back of my neck. Look, this is the explanation. I lazily leaned against the unlucky guy. Bonelessly. He also cooperated well, standing steadily and letting me lean on him. See? I've been bitten by someone. I deliberately said in the crudest tone. It's an alpha from God knows where. Maybe he's even a wanted criminal. Would the Lee family, who values reputation, still want a used Omega who has been marked? William was so angry that his face turned purple. You're rebelling. Guards. Arrest him and lock him in the attic until the Lee family comes to claim him. Several bodyguards in black suits immediately surrounded us. They were all alphas. The pressure of their pheromones made me uncomfortable, and I subconsciously shrank behind the unlucky guy. Almost at the same time, he moved. It wasn't a big move. He just slightly turned his body to block me more tightly. Then, the air instantly froze. The brandy-scented pheromone, so strong that it was almost tangible, exploded like an invisible wave. Those bodyguards didn't even have time to react. Their legs went weak and they knelt on the ground with a thud, unable to get up. William also staggered and turned pale. Needless to say, Camila looked as if she was dying. I felt extremely exhilarated, but my legs were also extremely weak. The pheromone of a top-level alpha was enough to make an Omega who had just gone through their first heat weak in the knees, even if it wasn't directed at me. Moreover, this guy's pheromones are damned well matched with mine. Just for that moment, I even felt a hint of pleasure. Damn it. I quickly grabbed the unlucky guy's sleeve and dragged him outside. If I stayed any longer, I'm afraid I'd collapse right here. Let's go. Let's go. After getting out of the Lin family's main gate, I let go of him and gasped for breath. Hey, tone down that smell of yours, I complained, wrinkling my nose. It stinks so bad. Sure enough, he restrained his pheromones, and the air became much fresher. After walking for a while, the unlucky guy suddenly spoke up. Don't you like the Lee family? I was puzzled. Why do you suddenly ask this? He didn't stop walking and stared straight ahead. Just asking casually. Tisk. I curled my lips disdainfully and complained. Who the hell would like him? He's a cripple. I heard he's in his 30s and has never even dated an Omega. There must be something wrong with him in that regard. Either his thing is too small, or he can't get it up. I rambled on without a filter, casting all the vicious speculations I could think of on him. Anyway, if I married him, I'd definitely be a widow before long. Maybe I'd even be psychopathically tortured by him. Moreover, I've heard some rumors. I lowered my voice and leaned closer. They say that guy with the Lee surname has extremely dirty methods. He's involved in the underworld and no one knows how much blood is on his hands. He got his leg crippled back then because he offended too many people. Whoever marries such a person is doomed to have bad luck. Only after I finished speaking did I realize that he had stopped walking and was looking at me sideways. The light from the street lamp fell on his face, half bright and half in shadow. Those eyes behind the broken lenses were bottomless. What are you looking at? Everything I said is true. Damn it, a useless person who can't even remember who he is, and he still dares to look at me with such a look? He finally spoke, his voice a bit hoarse, as if sandpaper had rubbed against it. Benjamin, a cripple, impotent and small, he repeated what I had just said, enunciating each word very softly, but it was like small stones hitting the ice. Yes, that's right. I puffed out my chest. Is there a problem? He didn't answer. He just averted his gaze and let out a very soft, breathy laugh from his throat. No problem. Absolutely no problem. After he said that, he continued walking forward. I stood there, stunned. What kind of reaction is this? I was a bit annoyed, feeling like I'd punched a bale of cotton. Hey, wait for me. I chased after him and kicked a small, annoying pebble at my feet. What's with that attitude of yours? I said something bad about Benjamin, and this is your reaction. He didn't stop walking, and the lines of his profile looked especially cold and hard in the night. So what else should I do? He retorted. I'm not Benjamin. Well, that does make sense. I was momentarily at a loss for words. I'm going to see my mom. Why are you so nervous? I gave him a cross look in annoyance. This guy has been acting a bit strange ever since he heard this morning that I was going to see my mom. He even walked with his hands and feet moving in an awkward way, holding the discounted fruits I managed to grab at the market with difficulty. His knuckles were white from gripping. The plastic bag made a rustling sound as he squeezed it tightly. I clicked my tongue in disgust. My mom isn't going to eat you. She's very nice. The unlucky guy lowered his head silently. His bangs covered his eyes, and only his tightly pursed lips were visible. I don't know, he replied sullenly. Pretend. Keep pretending. Why didn't you act so, I don't know, when you took down the Lin family's bodyguards? I'm too lazy to expose his poor acting skills. Anyway, he is my dog now. The master is going to see the most important person, and it seems reasonable for the dog to look nervous. I stopped downstairs of the old residential building and looked up at the rusty windowsill on the 3rd floor. I felt a bit bitter in my heart. Carry the things well? Keep up. I took the lead and walked into the dim corridor. The air was filled with the smell of dampness and dust. The footsteps behind me were very light, but they carried a kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. Without turning back, I could feel his eyes sweeping over this dilapidated environment like a searchlight. What? Haven't you seen such a shabby place before? I sneered with a raise of my lips, my eyes full of thorns. I grew up here and lived here for 18 years. If I hadn't differentiated into the stammed Omega and been targeted by those bastards, I would never have left here. When I reached the door on the 3rd floor, I paused, took a deep breath, and put away all the hostility on my face. My voice became a bit lower. My mother is very timid. Don't scare her. A low came from behind me. I took out the key and turned it in the old keyhole. As soon as I pushed the door open, a crack, a strong, mixed and aggressive alpha pheromone suddenly hit me in the face. It's not just one kind. There are at least 5 kinds. Whiskey, tobacco, cheap cologne. All kinds of filthy smells are intertwined. Like a basin of dirty water splashed on my face. My heart skipped a beat. The blood rushed to my head in an instant and then turned cold in an instant. Mom! I didn't even have time to care about the unlucky guy behind me. I rushed into the narrow room like a madman. The living room was empty, but the disgusting smell was even stronger. I kicked open the half-closed bedroom door. On the bed, Mom was curled up in an extremely distorted posture. The thin sheet slipped off, revealing her thin back and large patches of blue and purple fingerprints. The air was filled with the lingering and despairing Omega pheromones, which were forcibly induced and then roughly trampled on, and blood. Faint groans came from under the quilt. Mom, I threw myself beside the bed. My hands were shaking so badly that I dared not touch her. Mom turned her head with difficulty. Her empty eye sockets faced my direction. Her lips were chapped and stained with blood foam. Shin. Her voice was so weak that every word was like a blade cutting across my heart. Don't take revenge. Live well. After saying this, her hands suddenly dropped. His eyes completely lost their last glimmer of light. The world fell silent. I stood there stiffly, with only my heavy breathing echoing in my ears. Lucas. Somehow, the alpha behind me had walked in and stood behind me, casting a shadow. I could even smell the clean yet dangerous brandy scent on him, which clashed sharply with the foul air in the room. I suddenly stood up, due to the sudden movement. My vision went dark for a moment. Blood rushed to my eyes, blurring my vision. It's them. It must be them. I was like a caged beast, pacing in the confined space. My nails dug deeply into my palms, leaving blood-stained marks. They couldn't force me into a marriage alliance, so they targeted my mother. How dare they? I'll kill them. I must kill them. I roared, my voice hoarse, filled with despair and crazy hatred. Finally, I suddenly turned around and grabbed the collar of the man beside me. Unlucky guy. Did you hear me? I'm going to kill them. Help me. You owe me a life. You have to help me. I stared fixedly at him, with tears mingling with hatred rolling down from my bloodshot eyes. He let me grab him, his tall body remaining motionless. Behind the broken lenses, those eyes looked at me deeply, like an unfathomable ancient well. There was no surprise, no sympathy, not even any consolation. There was only a kind of, almost cold-blooded calmness. He raised his hand, not to push me away, but to gently brush aside the wet and messy hair on my face. His fingertips were icy cold. Okay, he only said one word. The first heat of an Omega comes without warning and is overwhelming. It's hot. It's like being thrown into a steamer, and even the spaces between the bones are burning. Since half a year ago, when I cried and begged that unlucky guy to kill those beasts of the Lin family to avenge my mother, he has never come back. I thought he died outside, or he took my order as an excuse and ran away. After all, who would really be willing to work for an Omega they've only met a few times? In these 6 months, I've barely managed to survive by doing odd jobs and selling the last few things in my home. But once the heat came, all the hard shells melted away. The temporary mark on the back of my neck that he bit out has long faded almost completely. But my body still remembers. It remembers that overbearing brandy pheromone. I curled up on the cold floor, biting the corner of the quilt. But deep inside my body, I was clamoring for that alpha. I need him. My reason tells me that this is very dangerous. But my instinct is like a wildly growing vine, driving me to stagger to my feet and push open the door. I'm going to find him, even if there's only the slightest possibility. The alley entrance at night is darker than ever. The air is filled with a strong smell of blood. And I suddenly sniffed the smell of brandy. It's him. I almost stumbled and rushed over. My body was weak due to being in heat, but I was driven by great joy. Turned the corner. The sight in front of me made my blood freeze instantly. There were at least 8 alphas lying haphazardly on the ground, their fates unknown. The strong pheromones belonging to them mixed with the smell of blood were nauseating. Several tall and strong men in black suits were silently squatting on the ground. With some sharp tools, they skillfully cut open the necks of the fallen alphas, as if they were digging for something. And in the middle of them, there stood a man. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, and his slicked-back black hair was immaculate. The gold-rimmed glasses replaced the previous shabby ones. The look in his eyes behind the lenses was sinister and cold, like a poison blade. At this moment, he was holding a young alpha by the throat with one hand, lifting him off the ground. The face of the man being held was contorted in pain. I recognized him. He was my half-brother, Elijah. Benjamin. Elijah squeezed out a broken sound from his throat, and all the color drained from his face. SP. Spare me. The Lin family. The Lin family won't dare again. When he mentioned the 2 words, Lin family, it seemed that he wanted to evoke something. The man, Benjamin, smiled. It was as low as a devil's whisper. The Lin family? He repeated it, with a calm tone but extreme contempt. Soon, there will be no Lin family. After saying that, he loosened his wrist and threw Elijah heavily to the ground. Then, he lifted his polished leather shoes and stepped precisely and mercilessly on Elijah's posterior neck gland. The soft sound of bones breaking and Elijah's dying twitches were especially clear in the silent alley. The man just lowered his head slightly and tidied up his cufflinks slowly. That action was as elegant as if he had just finished a concert. I felt like I was in an ice cave, shivering all over, and couldn't even feel the heat of the estrus period. Benjamin, that legendary underworld boss, turned out to be the dog I picked up. Boss, everything is taken care of. The man closest to me respectfully handed over a refrigerated metal box. It was self-evident what was inside. Benjamin slowly took off his gloves, without even looking, and said casually, "You scared him." The deep voice mixed with a gravelly whisper overlapped with the gentle swallowing sound when he ate steamed buns in my memory. Clatter. Several strong men in black, including the one who reported just now, knelt on the ground in unison, their heads bowed. I watched the scene, trembling all over. The heat of the rut and fear were fighting in my veins, and the gland on the back of my neck throbbed. Benjamin took a step and walked towards me. The soft sound of his leather shoes stepping on the water on the ground seemed to step on my heart with each step. He stopped in front of me, and his tall figure completely enveloped me. In the shadow, his smiling eyes were even more terrifying than when he crushed Elijah's gland just now. Little wildcat. He bent down and leaned close to my hot ear, his voice like poison silk. Are you in heat? I wanted to scold him, but my throat was blocked by the surging pheromones. I could only make a whimpering tremor like a small animal. Benjamin's fingertips slid across my spasming abdomen and accurately pressed on my soaked underwear through the fabric. Shaking like this, he chuckled and maliciously ground his fingertips. It seems you miss me very much. No, I don't. Let me go. I squeezed out a few words with all my strength, but my voice was soft and trembly. Without any deterrence, he let out a long sigh, his tone teasing and helpless. Little wildcat, tell me, who exactly won't let the other go? Only then did I realize that I not only didn't push him away, but instead tightly grabbed his expensive suit and rubbed against him. I persisted stubbornly, sinking my teeth into his firm neck, with a sobbing voice but no strength at all. It was more like an impatient nibbling. You, don't interfere. I want to mark you. I want to mark you. The man in front of me let out a low laugh, his chest vibrating. That laugh was both joyful and cruel. All right, open your mouth. Let me teach you how to mark someone. Benjamin pinned me down with one hand and went to undo his belt with the other. He calmly ordered the people behind him, turn your backs. Several strong men stood facing the wall. I knelt on the ground, and Benjamin grabbed my chin. His rough fingertips rubbed harshly against the soft flesh of my lower lip as he said softly, Little wildcat, hold it well. This kind of marking doesn't require biting. My head bobbed up and down. Tears fell on the veins and then were swallowed along with the thick liquid. My throat felt very uncomfortable. This bastard was deliberately taking revenge on me. So I gave it a hard squeeze. Ouch! You're being naughty, he commented like this, so I suffered a great deal. I knelt on the ground, gasping for breath and coughing desperately. My cheeks were burning hot, and my mouth was filled with his taste. Suddenly, blinding car lights shone from the alley entrance, and a bright beam of light split the darkness. The sound of the engine approached from afar and stopped at the alley entrance. I looked up like a frightened bird. Benjamin had already calmly tidied up his belt, and there wasn't a single wrinkle on his suit jacket. He looked down at me haughtily, with a kind of lazy satisfaction in his eyes. It seems we have to continue in another place. He bent down and easily picked me up horizontally, just like picking up a kitten. I struggled a bit, but I was weak all over, and the heat of the estrus period swept over me again. My body betrayed me and instinctively moved closer to the pheromones he emitted. The door of the black car opened silently. He carried me inside. The interior of the car was spacious, filled with the same scent as on him. The car started smoothly, leaving the dirty alley and the body on the ground far behind. I was trapped in his arms, and the gland on the back of my neck throbbed hotly due to the proximity of the alpha pheromones. My consciousness fluctuated between lust and fear. I don't know how long it had passed when the car stopped. I was carried into a strange place. It wasn't my shabby rental house, nor was it the Lin family. The light here was dim, but I could feel that the space was large, and there was a faint aroma of red wine in the air. Then, I was thrown onto an incredibly soft big bed. My body sank into the velvet bedding. Benjamin leaned over me, and his pheromones filled the air. Little wildcat, your heat has just begun. His voice was like a spell, whispering softly. A full 7 days. I was in his pheromones, drowsy and sinking, being marked repeatedly. It was like an endless fever. Figures in white coats filed out carrying freezers. The smell in the room hadn't dissipated yet. The smell of brandy mixed with the smell of strawberry cream, twining in the air. I lay on the bed, not even wanting to move. My whole body felt like it had been taken apart and put back together. My eyes were red and swollen, and my throat was hoarse. I was both aggrieved and angry, like a small animal that had been badly bullied. Footsteps sounded behind me. It was Benjamin. He smelled of the fresh soap after a shower, mixed with that damned brandy smell. A hand landed on my back, stroking me gently. I instinctively shrank back. What? Are you angry? His voice was very close, with a faint smile. I buried my face in the pillow, biting my lips, too aggrieved to say a word. In the past, I would have jumped up and kicked him. Beast! Bastard! Pervert! I would curse him with all the bad words I could think of. But now, seeing him crush Elijah's gland, hearing those men in black call him boss, and recalling the madness of these 7 days and 7 nights, I was afraid, a fear deep in my bones. Not talking, he leaned over, and his warm breath sprayed on the back of my neck. There was a brand new, highly effective pheromone blocking patch covering it. which he had those doctors in white coats put on me. Under the blocking patch was the gland that had been repeatedly bitten and injected with pheromones. It was no longer a temporary mark. It was a permanent one. My body was completely tainted with his scent. Become mute. The hand pinching my chin tightened slightly. Or did you scream yourself hoarse in bed? The sense of humiliation made my cheeks flush. I suddenly raised my head, wanting to scold him, meeting his smiling but cold eyes. All the words got stuck in my throat. In the end, it only turned into a stifled sob. He released his hand in satisfaction, as if admiring his masterpiece, much more obedient. I stayed at the Lee family's place for a week, or rather, I was under house arrest for a week. The food, clothing, and daily necessities were all top-notch. It was better than what I had in the alley in the past 18 years combined. The servants were respectful to me, and the bodyguards never left my side. Benjamin was nowhere to be seen during the day and occasionally came back at night. He didn't touch me. He just sat on the sofa and watched me eat. On the surface, life was indeed good, but I didn't believe it. Not at all. William was also very nice to my mother back then. He rented an apartment for her, bought her clothes, and said sweet words to her. But when Camila found out, didn't he immediately abandon my mother? He just watched helplessly as Camila hired someone to attack my mother and blind her eyes without saying a single word. Benjamin is nice to me now. Is it because of the novelty? Is it because the rut has just passed and the pheromones still have an effect? Or is it because he sees me as an interesting newly caught prey? What if he gets bored? What if he finds his next target? These alphas, especially those at the top, have no hearts at all. I can't stay here. This soft bed is a swamp. This expensive food is poison. This seemingly peaceful life could turn into hell at any time. So, I started planning my escape. Things went unexpectedly smoothly. The guards seemed to have slackened off. I easily slipped out of that golden cage. I bought a ticket for the earliest flight abroad. My backpack was heavy, stuffed with a few souvenirs stolen from Benjamin's study, 2 watches, several brooches, and a small ornament that looked very expensive. It's enough for me to live incognito in a place where no one knows me for a long time. This is what he owes me. He's had me for so long. What's wrong with me taking some compensation? So I didn't feel the least bit guilty. I even thought I'd taken too little. I got to the airport without any hindrance. Looking at the bustling departure lounge, I could almost taste freedom, until I walked through the security checkpoint. Suddenly, a shrill alarm went off. A bright red warning sign popped up on the display screen. High compatibility marked Omega pheromone anomaly. My mind went blank with a buzz. The next second, the whole airport seemed to be paused. An emergency evacuation notice sounded on the radio. Passengers were evacuated in a panic. Then, countless dark figures swarmed in from all directions. Black suits, sunglasses, and cold expressions. In an instant, they surrounded me tightly. There was no way out. The crowd made way. Benjamin walked over, still in that neat suit, with ice-cold eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses. There was a cigarette between his lips, and the scarlet glow flickered. He stopped in front of me, exhaled a puff of smoke, and said with a cold smile, "Little thing, you taught the dog to eat meat, and now you want to starve it to death." I was stiff all over, and my blood seemed to freeze. Benjamin reached out and easily snatched the backpack that I was clutching tightly. He unzipped it. Then, he stretched out his other hand and slowly pulled out the small bag containing the stolen goods from it. He weighed it in his hand. "Good taste?" he commented, a faint smile curving his lips. "It's just that you're a bit too bold." After the fear, there was great despair and anger. Throwing caution to the wind, I no longer cared about being afraid and shouted at him, "Benjamin, we've slept together. You've got your things back. What else do you want?" He didn't reply to me. He just leaned slightly towards me, enveloping me in the smell of tobacco and brandy. "Then tell me first, why do you have to leave me?" Not willing to show weakness, I tilted my head back and retorted, "What about you? Why do you have to have me? Why?" Benjamin gave a soft laugh and casually snuffed out the cigarette, but with his fingertips. "Was it love at first sight because of your beauty? Or since you picked me up and saved me? According to my twisted principle of repaying kindness, my life belongs to you. So, you as a whole person also have to be mine." He paused for a moment and added, "Think whatever you want. Anyway, I just like you and I'm determined to have you." "You're talking nonsense," I blurted out angrily. "You're just a liar. A pervert. You're no different from a scumbag like William. You're all bastards." Mentioning the name William, Benjamin's eyes suddenly darkened. "Little thing, don't compare me with that kind of trash." The air instantly dropped to freezing point. I was so frightened that I shivered and immediately became timid. I wished I could take back what I just said. The next second, everything spun around. He grabbed my waist and picked me up horizontally. Ah, what are you doing? Put me down. I struggled with all my limbs, but it was like being trapped by an iron hoop. He carried me and strode out of the airport, ignoring the dark, suited bodyguards behind and the mess. Don't you want to know? He looked down at me, the corner of his mouth curving into a cold arc. Come on, I'll take you to see my true heart. He emphasized the words true heart especially, looking at the surging gloom in his eyes. I had a bad premonition for no reason. His true heart was probably going to be bloody. Moreover, it was William's blood. The black motorcade directly rammed open the door of the Lynn family's villa. Benjamin carried me and walked into the messy living room over the broken door panels, just like a king inspecting his territory. William and Camila, in their pajamas, ran downstairs in panic. Who are you? What do you want? William shouted bravely on the surface but timidly at heart. But when he saw Benjamin's face, his legs trembled. Benjamin ignored him, walked straight to the main sofa and sat down, casually putting me on his lap. Behind him, a man in a black suit stepped forward and threw a stack of documents on the coffee table. Photos, recordings, transfer records. William, having an extramarital affair, luring an innocent Omega to have a child out of wedlock, and then abandoning her after having his way with her. Camila, hiring someone to injure others, causing the victim Omega to go blind and indirectly leading to her death. Elijah, repeatedly hiring alphas to cause trouble, ultimately resulting in the evidence of crimes was read out one by one, clear, cold, and irrefutable. I was encircled in Benjamin's arms and stared at the scene in disbelief. When did he collect all these evidences? Benjamin lowered his head and chuckled in my ear in a voice only I could hear. Does it feel good to get revenge, baby? The warm breath brushed past my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. My ears turned red instantly, and I quickly turned my head away. Who's your baby? Benjamin let out a soft laugh and didn't tease me anymore. He raised his hand. Immediately, two tall bodyguards stepped forward and held down Camila, who was screaming and struggling. A flash of cold light. Camila let out a shrill scream that didn't sound human. Blood splashed out. I instinctively closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the eyes that had once glared at me and my mother viciously had become two bloody holes. An eye for an eye. Watching her struggle in pain, the hatred that had been pent up in my chest for years finally found an outlet. It's really so satisfying. After dealing with Camila, the rest would be easy. Benjamin made a phone call. Probably he used his power as the chairman of that multinational group. Soon, William's company was exposed for scandals such as tax evasion and illegal transactions. There were both witnesses and physical evidence. Before long, William and the blind and crazy Camila were taken away by the police who had heard the news. What awaited them would be imprisonment. The Lynn family was completely finished. The sun shone through the huge French windows, casting warm spots of light on the carpet. There was a faint fragrance of flowers and the smell of coffee in the air. I leaned back on the sofa, feeling a bit lazy. Benjamin hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my neck, his voice hoarse after satisfaction. Baby, you've avenged your hatred. Our mom has been moved to the best cemetery with permanent care. All the Lynn family's industries have been cleared and transferred to your name, and all my movable and immovable properties, including the shares of the shipping group and the underground market. He paused for a moment and planted a burning kiss on my earlobe. Now I'm yours too. I stiffened. Damn it, what is this? Crush me with money and power, and then claim ownership? It was clearly him who deceived me first. I was seething with anger, and the fire in my heart made my glands throb. I suddenly turned around, broke free from his embrace, and glared at him fiercely. Benjamin, he raised his eyebrows, seemingly enjoying my angry look. There was even a hint of anticipation in his eyes. For deceiving me, for pretending to have amnesia, for biting me, for bullying me. The angrier I got as I spoke, remembering how obedient and docile he was when I first picked him up. Then I remembered being tossed around by him in various ways in bed these days. It was all a trap. Finally, I lifted my chin, pointed at the expensive carpet under his feet, and said word by word, "Now, go and kneel down for me." The air fell silent. Benjamin looked at me with an inscrutable look in his eyes. I was already prepared to be grabbed by the neck and fucked to death in bed. Unexpectedly, Benjamin just raised his eyebrows, his eyes full of indulgence and playfulness. He really lifted the hem of his suit, knelt on one knee, and then the other. His movements were smooth and elegant, as if he wasn't being punished but performing an ancient ritual. He looked up at me, his eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses focused and deep. Yes, my master. The sunlight fell on his slicked-back black hair, gilding it with a golden edge. For a moment, I seemed to see again the unlucky guy who had collapsed in the alley on that rainy night. Only this time, I knew he wasn't a dog. He was the dragon who was willing to submit to me.